All right, and good day, everyone, and welcome again to a brand new session of Truly Foundation and A Course in Miracles. And I am your temporary guide, temporary host, and coach. My name is Oliver, and I am delighted to be here today for what is going to be another great review lesson as we are on our 13th day of reviewing the last 20 workbook lessons out of A Course in Miracles. And today we're going to be reviewing workbook lesson 213. Can you believe that we have been at this over 200 days? I would say that we've been at this about 200, maybe 35 days, because some of our lessons were in two parts and a few were in three parts. And we have not quit. We remain on this journey of transformation by our own free will, by our saying yes to an invitation to come together around the gift that has been given us, which is A Course in Miracles. It's a gift. I mean, this was a tremendous gift in my life personally. It came to me at a time where I was absolutely, I was absolutely on the verge of chunking the whole thing because of the combination of what I had been taught, what I had experienced, what I had what I was using as my primary source of spiritual understanding, and not having clarity about even that. And here comes the answer to my heart's cry. I want to know the truth. I want to above all else, I want to know who I am. Above all else, I want to know who God is. Above all else, I want understanding about this world, this experience that I'm having called a human experience. And lo and behold, the invitation or the asking was responded to with this document that has now just opened me up like a flood. And I'm so happy about it. And 17 years later, after studying and practicing and seeing the results in my own life, I now sit here as by my own free will, knowing that I have a shared interest with all humanity. And say, yes, I want to extend that which has been given to me, give I unto you. I understand now when some of the writings and some of the other sacred scriptures that says, other sacred books says that that which we saw from the beginning, which we saw with our own eyes, that which we heard, that which we had looked upon, is what we share with you. I understand why those statements were made now. They were made out of a heart of sincerity. And so I come to you from a place of sincerity, from a place of certainty, from a place of gratitude. And I thank you for being here. Those that are here daily, those that pop in and pop out, or if you're a first-time listener to one of these lessons, be not dismayed. Every one of these lessons contain all of the lessons, and that's what happens in a perfect, in a pure, in an absolute experience of that which is real, that which is knowledge, that which is truth, that which is of one law, that which is of love, that which is unalterable, and that which is eternal. When we engage with that which is changeless, when we engage in that which is every thought of God, when we engage in that which God creates, that which love creates, when we engage in that which is beyond learning, which is beyond time and space, which has no opposites, when we engage in that has no beginning and no end, it merely is. The consistency, the certainty, that the peace and the joy and the happiness that comes along with truth, the light that lighteth our awareness, expands our consciousness. Includes an experience of purification, sanctification, retranslation, where we're being not conformed but transformed or retranslated, transfiguration. Our thinking is being transfigured. It's an experience we call salvation or deliverance from an attitude of thanksgiving. And we experience what we call the peace of God that comes through us and it belongs to everyone. So, let's get started. And today, once again, we were going to run up to the theme of forgiveness in this lesson, which it appears that we can never get away from it. And why would you want to get away from it? If it's the means by which we stand in truth. If it's the means by which we take the final step to our complete release, we would want to stay engaged with it. So, lesson 213, starts out like all the other 12 review lessons starts with our central theme, and that is, I am not a body. I am free. I remain as God created me. And that's the foundation of all of our review lessons. And it's the foundation of today's review lesson. I am not a body. You are not a body. No body represents one's true identification. And in that, our true identification is what makes us free. What is our true identification? I still remain as God created me. How did God create you and me in all creation? God merely extended its own very essence in nature. And in that extension, he calls it creation or extension. And that which is extended does not leave its own source. Ideas don't leave their source. So God, in its nature being love, love gives. So love gave all of itself in creation by extending all that it is in creation, and not at the loss of itself, because in creation, in reality, in truth, there is no loss. There's no such idea as loss. There's no in creation, there is no such thing as duality. There's no such thing as opposites. There's no such thing as two or three or four or any idea of multiplicity. In creation, there is only one. Only one. And there will always be only the one. God is. We've said this on many occasions, as the Course teaches us, that God is and there is nothing else. There is nothing else. So if we, if you, if anyone has any degree of awareness or consciousness of oneself, then that consciousness and that awareness must be the same consciousness and awareness that God is. Ooh. And within that consciousness and within that awareness, which God is, where oneness relies, only that which is the very nature and essence of that consciousness and awareness can be extended, no different than itself, but just like itself. So therefore, in creation, God extended himself or itself. And what God extends is his very self, which, we understand that God is light, which there is no darkness, meaning there is no opposite to light. And it says that God is love. In love, there is no opposite. So there's no hatred. There's no, there's nothing that's unloving. And so what God called its creation, or what we have identified as God creation, we identify it with the idea of what I am. I am. And what we're saying is I am what God is, because what God is, I am. Because in extension, that's what happened. God extended his very own self, and it creates something different or opposite or in competition of, but he created his very own self. And then looked back upon himself and says, what? This is very good. And he called it the I am. This is I am. God is, therefore I am. And then now we've come to understand through what the sages was discovering, the mystery that was held back in time past, what some of the sages were speaking of that was way above the head of most people of their day. There's always been people that spoke from a place of reality. And those that have not seen that light. Just put up resistance to what was being said. And we all know the historical story about Jesus and his life. And as he came to bring the revelation of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man to humanity, and to bring the reality to humanity that it was, in its true essence, it was humanity was the very I am of God, or the offspring of God, or the inheritance of God, or the, certain terms it uses, the sons of God, the children of God, God's creation. And that is who humanity is now and has always been. But somewhere, somehow, a virus got into our thinking. And it was the virus of separation, where we somehow dreamed of breaking the code of love, dream of breaking the code of light and becoming something different than what God created. Even to the point where we created or made these bodies in this world. We went all out to prove that we are separate from God. We are an entity unto ourselves, even giving ourselves a personal name and a personal history. As though we was out to prove that love was not real, that light does have darkness, and that we could successfully detach ourselves from the source of our life. And now we've been learning and coming to understanding that that can only happen outside of the reality of the oneness that God is. So it would have to happen in an unreality space that we call dreams or hallucinations or fantasies or vain imaginings, because it can't happen in reality. We'd have to be like falling asleep and dreaming of going to exile, falling asleep and dreaming of what? Being prodigal. And so that's what this world has acted out as though on a stage in a movie. And then we find ourselves here as part of the actors. But what we have also found out is that we can stand apart from the actors and observe what's going on. Well, who's standing apart and observing? Who is that is observing? Who is that is aware of this story that has been played out called humanity? I know I'm carrying on here right now, but I'm going to get to my point. My point is this. We have discovered that indeed we are not bodies. And that when the mind is transformed and renewed to its original state of oneness with its source, and we begin to embrace the reality of our true identification, and also take on the purposes for which now we can serve the will of our Father, which is our will also, because that's where our best interest is. That we understand that this seeming body that we are aware of is merely becomes a communication device whereby now we communicate to those that appear to be asleep. We communicate through these bodies, which now become a healthy, serviceable devices for us now to express the truth of who we are and to help all our siblings, to help all our siblings, all humanity to wake up to their very own self and begin to experience the oneness that we all share, the one life, the one love, the one being. That is quite obvious what we are. And we're finding out that you don't have to wait until the body is laid down and you find yourself without a body, that you still exist. That the body is only a temporary device. It's not a part of our true nature. It's not a part of our reality. But it's just a part of our experience. But our experience is not who we are. It's what we've chose to experience. And so, yes, we're not a body. We're free. And we remain as God created us, as his very own self. And so Workbook Lesson 193 is the lesson that we are reviewing today in this lesson 213. And it reads, all things are lessons God would have me learn. All things, all form, all thoughts, all ideas, all sensation, all activities, all events, or lessons God would have me learn. So in other words, now that we find ourselves here in this three-dimensional world of form and time, with relationships, it's saying here that God has the wisdom and the ability to take all of these occurrences in our life and turn them into lessons that he would have us, or she or it will have us to learn. And the lessons are for our awakening. The lessons are for our awakening to the truth of who we are. And so it says that a lesson is a miracle. And when I say lessons, I'm not talking about the idea that we have about learning lessons, or the idea about teaching one a lesson or punishing one through lessons. That's not what we're talking about. That's a man-made idea. That's not a God idea. It says, but all lessons is a miracle which God offers to us. Why? Because God has an interest in us, in us waking up. It says, so all lessons are a miracle which God offers to us in place of, to replace or in place of thoughts that we have made that hurt us. When we don't think with the mind of God or the mind of Christ, when we don't think, when we don't perceive from God's perspective, from the perspective of love and light, when we don't perceive from the perspective of reality, when we do not think in alignment with our true self, it hurts us. We've learned in previous review that pain and suffering in and of itself is a wrong perception. And so everything that we could ever experience that would be, you would call a negative experience, because it brought on pain and heartache and suffering. It said these things were experienced because of our wrong thinking, of our wrong perception, how we perceive our own self as well as others, as well as all the things in this world. It said this is through wrong perception of our wrong thinking. It hurts us. So God gives us lessons, or takes these the activities of our lives. God takes the content of our lives, the content of our relationships, takes everything in this world, and miraculously present them to us as a lesson, and offer this to us in place of thoughts that made us to hurt ourselves. So what we learn of him becomes the way we are set free. So God is all about our freedom. God is all about our happiness. God is all about our joy. God is all about us knowing who we are. We are joy and happiness and peace and loveliness. We are eternal and changeless. We are impregnable. God wants us to really know that we cannot, in our true self, be hurt or harmed or attacked or destroyed. We can't be born, or we can't die. God wants us to know, just like you would want your child to know. Just like you would want your child to know the truth. God wants his kids to know the truth about who they are. You know how it is when your child is born, just so innocent. Their hearts are so open to all that is surrounding them. And we as good parents, we seek to protect them from the outside forces that would corrupt their innocence. And so naturally, we do that naturally. We care for our children. We care above all for their safety, their well-being. And so we try to, and most mothers wants to be with that kid, for those early years, as to protect them, protect their innocence. And a lot of parents struggle with that because of the way this world is and the way we value this world. We choose to, hand our kids over before they can even talk. For others to train. And this is not a statement of guilt. This is just the decisions that we have to make. And so, for those who are fortunate to be able to stay with their children until maybe school age or kindergarten age, the day comes where they say, the kid can now communicate, understands enough, and can communicate back to mom and dad what's going on. So we release our children off to school. We send them off to school, and the reconditioning begins. Where now they're not only being taught by the parents, but they've been taught by their peers. They've been taught by the teachers. They've been taught by the culture, the environment. They've been taught by the world. And the world goes to work on them immediately with labels, with ideas, with concepts. And we begin to see our kid abandon what they have known for something that they have not known. And that becomes a concern of the parents. It's almost like the child began to lose their identity. They forget who they are. What they hear, what they see out there under someone else's guidance, it appeals to their It appears to their personality or personhood. And we see that very innocent kid that may have been guarded for 4 or 5 years, all of a sudden in 4 or 5 days, they have abandoned what they know themselves to be and who they know themselves to be for these new ideas about themselves that is coming from all over the place. And the parents saying, oh my God, what did I do? What have I done? And so that parent would naturally want to remind the kid of who they are. Hey, look, you are a Drysdale. You are of this origin. You are of this clan, this family, this culture. You are of this religion. You are of this school of thought. So it becomes a constant It becomes a constant battle. As we see, the more they go out into the culture, the more they make other decisions about who they are and what they stand for and what their core values are and what's important. And then it just gets into a whole competition thing. How many of you experienced that as parents? You know what I'm talking about. But the same way you saw the unraveling of their best interests being re-raveled, reconditioned by the world. It's the same way that God knows that as we acquiesce to do the same in our life, it's where we forget who we are. We lose our innocence. We basically become the result of all these ideas that are contrary to who we really are. To where it's almost like we give up our freedom to be imprisoned by this world. And we begin to take on a mindset and thoughts that actually hurt us. And so until that child comes to a point in their life where they realize, I don't know who I am. I'm not comfortable with myself. I've become this entity of fear and doubt and unbelief and worry, and I feel unsafe and under attack, and this world is so big and I feel so little. I feel so insignificant. I don't feel loved. The world has used me, and look how they have left me. I'm so hurt. I'm so disappointed. I feel alone on an island. I feel like a prodigal. And so it says here that a lesson is a miracle which God offers to me in place of the thoughts I made that hurt me. What I learn of him becomes the way I am set free. And so I choose to learn his lessons and forget my very own. And that's the process of transformation that we at some point decide to get involved with. And so these workbook lessons that we're going through serves as lessons that God would have us to know, to teach us, for the purpose of what? Replacing the thoughts that we embraced, that we got conditioned by, the error that we was taught, the ideas that are not ideas of God. God now offers us these lessons to replace the things that are hurting us. And so we get to a point that all we want to know is the truth. And that was my story. That's everyone's story. When we come to realize that all that we know is not all there is to know, and that most of the things that we know are not correct. And so we go on this journey of transformation, and this is where we are. And everyone is on a journey of transformation. Everyone's not in the same place, but everyone is on a journey. And in that journey, you still may be running a runaway child, running wild, trying to find yourself out in the world, trying to find yourself in a position, trying to find yourself among your friends, trying to find yourself, by finding a career, or finding a finding a hobby, or finding something to suppress the pain. Find something to mask these emotions and this anxiety. Trying to use the body that we think we are to get attention. Where all of us are somewhere in this process of transformation. Some of us are at a place where we're stuck, where we're still only working with inferior knowledge, inferior information, religious information, political information. Some of us have turned totally to politics and hoping politics has the solution to the world. Some have doubled down in their traditions, in their religious traditions, to where they have buried their heads in the sand and said, don't offer me anything new. I don't want to hear anything. I'm holding on to what my previous 5 generations have knew in the way they thought. Don't bother me. And then some have just said, God is dead. I don't believe in God. Some are there. That's where they are on their journey of transformation. But they're in a journey of transformation. The day that you appear to be associated with a physical body was the day that you started a period of transformation. Why? Because to be here, to be in this 3-dimensional world, appearing in the body is an indication that somewhere, somehow, the virus of the belief in separation infected you. And so you find yourself here looking for what? Looking for an antidote, looking for a solution. And the solution is not here. And then we all ultimately, because God guarantees this, that ultimately we all wake up at some point in this journey of transformation to discover that we were on a journey without a distance, that in reality we had never left the heart of God. We just fell asleep and fell into a dream of separation. And thank God, right? But today we are on lesson 213 in the workbook from A Course in Miracles, because we're all in this journey of transformation, being transformed by the renewing of our minds. And so all lessons are lessons that God would have me learn. And I'm going to read just a little from Workbook Lesson 193, which is where we had the content shared with us. It says, God does not know of learning, yet his will extends to what he does not understand, in that God doesn't know from knowing. That God does not know of learning. Learning only happens in time and space. In God's awareness, in God's consciousness, in reality, where there is truth, where there's only truth and only reality, there's nothing to learn. Everything is known. So learning is an idea that we made up in the dream of separation. It says God's will. It said God does not know of learning, yet his will extends to what he does not understand, in that he wills the happiness that his creation has inherited of him to be undisturbed. So it's the will of God that your original state of being be undisturbed. It is the will of God for you not to have the experience of separation or individuality. But because of a choice or seemingly choice, and we find ourselves in this place that is not the perfect place. It is not a place that reflects the perfection of our reality. So since we find ourselves here, whether we be in dreams or not, it says that God still extends his will, which is happiness for us, to all of us that has inherited what God is. He extends that and wants that to be undisturbed. He wants your happiness to be undisturbed. It is the will of God that he wills that your happiness be eternal and forever gaining scope, that your happiness be eternally expanding in the joy of full creation and eternally open and wholly limitless in him. That is God's will for you. God's will for you is happiness. And it will always be the will of God for you and for all of his creation. Why? Because that's what he created. God is happiness. And he wants your happiness to be undisturbed. And thus, it is God's will that provides the means to guarantee that it is done. So in our falling asleep and dreaming of exile and dreaming of being these separate personal selves in these frail bodies with the birth date and a death date and all the activities in between, which include a lot of human suffering. God said, even in that, he will provide the means by which his will is done, which is our happiness. And so even in the dream of separation, even in the dream of individuality, even in the dream of being in this world, feeling like we're under attack, feeling like we're under a threat, because the will of God is so. He even sends the remembrance of who we are within the dream. And uses everything within the dream to create lessons that he would have us learn. And these lessons are all designed to return us to our original state of being, to return us to the remembrance of who we are, to return us to the place that we really never left, and that is the heart of God. And so it says God has no contradictions, yet his creations believe that we see them. We believe that there are contradictions, and we see it. We say, how do we be here if God is good? Why are we in this world like this? The world's such a, place of horror and destruction, fear, guilt, and sin. Consciousness. It's in consciousness, right? Because sin is not real, but the consciousness of sin appear to be real, but it's not. It says, thus he has a need for one who can correct our erring sight and give us vision that will lead us back to where perception ceases to be. So in this world of perception, we need to be led out of this world of perception. We were led into this world of perception by a tiny mind idea, but we need to be led out of this world of perception by the truth or the light. And it says God does not perceive at all, but we find ourselves in a world of perception. But God doesn't perceive. God is. God doesn't interpret anything. God is love. God is light. And that's all there is. And that's our reality too. But somehow, again, we were led into this place called what? This place called the world of perception. And so, yet it is God who gives the means by which perception is made true and beautiful enough to let the light of heaven shines upon it. It is he who answers what his creation would contradict and keep his sinlessness forever safe. These are the lessons that God would have us learn. His will reflects them all. What is his will? Our happiness. If God's will is our happiness and our happiness alone, then it says that the lessons that God would have us learn will reflect our happiness. And they would reflect his loving kindness to us. Because he loves us. It says each lesson that God would have us learn has a central thought. Okay, here's God again, simplifying things. Each lesson that God would teach us, it has a central thought or a central idea. What is that? It says the same in all of the lessons. So God has one central thought or idea that he would teach us in every lesson. What is that? I want to know. Don't you want to know? We've talked about it before. It says the form of the lesson, it will change. The people involved would change. The circumstances and situation may be changed or different. But there's one central lesson that God is trying to teach us to get us back to what? Our reality, which includes our happiness, our joy, our peace. It says the form alone is changed with different circumstances, see, and different events, different people involved, different scenarios. You know, each day that we wake up, there's a different what? There's a different road or path to follow. The different decisions to be made every day. He say, and the events and the circumstances and the people involved would be different. He said, but there's one thing I will teach you in all of this. There's one thing that you need to learn. He says, with different characters, see, different people and different themes. What is the theme today? He says, apparent, but not real. All these things are a part of it. They're apparently a part of it, but they're not real. None of them. But God uses them, the content of our life, to teach us, to point us to the lessons that He will have us to learn. And it's one central theme for all of them. And we get ready to find out what it is. It says they are the same in fundamental content. In other words, he said the content is the same. It might be different people, different places, different event, but the content is the same. And the lessons that God would have us learn. He said, it is this. This is the lesson that God would have us to learn in every situation. And here it is. Forgive. I'm going to pause for a minute because I want you to have an emotional response to that. Forgive. That's the lesson. He says, forgive and you will see this differently. This what? This event, this activity, this relationship. You will see whatever you're confronting differently. Whatever you are perceiving, you're going to see it differently once you forgive. And remember now, when we say forgive, we're not talking about the forgiveness that this world teaches us. We're talking about the forgiveness that the Course introduced to us. We're talking about the forgiveness that Jesus demonstrated in his very own life. It's different than the forgiveness that we have been taught and we play around with, as though someone has really done something. And we want to leverage judgment on them, or we want to withhold something from them, or we want to hold a grievance against them, or withhold our love from them, or see them different than what they really are. See, all these things are involved with the forgiveness that we have been taught in the world. Forgive and you will see this differently. That is the central lesson in every one of our encounters. God is saying the way out of it, the way to transcend every situation and circumstance and condition in your life is through forgiveness. You say, Oliver, it's got to be something more than that. God is simple. We are complicated in our own self. No, it is forgiveness. And we're talking about the Course brand of forgiveness, the Jesus brand of forgiveness, or the God brand of forgiveness, not our brand, where we pardon someone or something for what we thought it did within a world of separation, within a world of perception. Let me go over there for a second. We talk about the Course's brand of forgiveness for just a minute. This is on page 401 in the workbook section of A Course in Miracles. And it says, and it asks the question, what is forgiveness? What is it? Because here it's telling us that is the central thing that God would have us learn in every situation, to forgive. And out of that forgiveness, we will see things differently, or we will see things from God's perspective, is what he's saying. You will see, from my perspective, from the perspective of reality, from the perspective of truth. And once you see from the perspective of reality and from the perspective of truth, you realize that there was nothing to see. You realize that all this happened in a place of unreality, and it can't have any effect on you. It doesn't change anything. You remain as what God created you. If you look at things through the lens of truth, through the lens of God, through the lens of your true identity, if you look at things from that perspective, then you realize that it's nothing. It doesn't change reality. And so it says here, what is forgiveness? And then it responds by saying forgiveness recognizes. It's a recognition. So it's about your awareness. It's about your, consciousness. What are you aware of? What you're conscious of? What you're focused on? Are you body conscious? Or are you aware of your divine self, which is formless and timeless? It says forgiveness recognizes what you thought your brother did to you, said to you, took from you, hurt you. It's a recognition that what you thought really happened to you, that it really has not occurred. When you get to the point to where you know who you really are, then you realize that nothing in this world can affect your reality. Nothing in this world can change or alter your divine self, your eternal self, your innocent self, your whole self, your complete self, your God self. Nothing can separate you from your true identification. Nothing that happens to the body, nothing that happens to the objects of this world, nothing that is said, nothing that is done can absolutely change your reality. You have become a master when you're able to now operate in that, to where you recognize that what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. In true forgiveness, it does not pardon sins because it doesn't believe in sin. It knows that sin is not real. It's part of the illusion. So there's nothing to pardon. It realizes that we make mistakes or errors, and errors can be corrected. A mistake can be corrected. And so it does not pardon sins and make them real. Why? Because there is no reality in sin. Sin is another idea that we made up. It's not a God idea. Just like death. Death is not a God idea. That's an idea that we made up. Birth is not a God idea. It's an idea that we made up. Being identified as a temporary body with a birth date and a death date and all the activity in between called personal history. That's not real. That's a temporary experience. It's like a passing cloud. Here today, gone tomorrow. That's why you see bodies here today, gone tomorrow. In reality, nothing come and goes. Everything would remain as it was created, because it was created out of the eternal nature of God. So what God creates don't come and go. It remains present always. And so who you are, who I am in reality, I remain as that, present and always. I may not recognize it because I'm asleep, dreaming of separation. But when I wake up to the reality of the truth, then I recognize it. And so it does not pardon sins and make them real. But true forgiveness sees there is no sin. See, this is why we call this advanced spirituality. This is not religious ideas. This is advanced spirituality. This is reality. This is the truth of who we are. This is beyond a mere human experience and a human idea. We're talking from a space that never changes. So it sees that there is no sin. Some of us are still wrestling with sin consciousness and guilt because we believe in the separation. We believe that we've fallen from grace. We believe all those separation and fear-based ideas, fear-based theology, that are only controlling mechanisms. They're not. Let me stay on course. So, and in that view, are all your sins forgiven? Why? Because you realize there is no sin. In that view. In what view? In the view that we don't make that which is unreal real. When we don't try to make what God didn't create real, then in that view, all things are forgiven. Because there's nothing to forgive in heaven. There's nothing to forgive in heaven. Why? Because there is no idea of separation. That only forgiveness is only needed in this three-dimensional space that we find ourselves in, where we have fallen asleep to the truth. And so we're in this place of perception, of error, of interpretation. And we are making mistakes and errors about our identification and about everything else. And so it is in that space that forgiveness becomes useful. And so we forgive or give up our sleeping view, our view of separation. We give up that view for God's point of view. That's what forgiveness is, to forgive one perception for another. Or to forgive or to give up your perception for God's reality. That's what forgiveness is. It's just a matter of perception. It's a matter of point of view. When a child is asleep in the bed and he's having a nightmare about, the tiger, lion, and the bear chasing him, that's a point of view from the child. It's real. He's fearful. But when the child wakes up and realizes what? He was only dreaming. It wasn't real. And he's happy now because he's safe at home with mommy and daddy. That's a different point of view. Well, the point of view that God is trying to get us to embrace through these lessons that he would have us to learn. He used forgiveness as a means of doing that. So that we can have the point of view that God has, that we are safe and at home in his heart, in her heart, in its heart, where we've always been. There is no separation. There is no tiger, lion, or bear. And so forgiveness merely, it says, and in this view are all sins forgiven. What is sin? Except a false idea. Notice now, let's get it straight. So you want to talk about it a little bit? What is sin? It's a false idea. It has nothing to do with what happens in the natural. No, it's a false idea. It's what happened in the mind. Something happened to the mind that created this false idea about who we are. It says that's what the concept of sin is, if you want to talk about it, even though we know sin doesn't exist. Why? Because a false idea is not real. So it doesn't exist. It's just a false idea. It's an illusion and an illusion. And so it says, what is sin except a false idea about what God created? It's a false idea that we hold about ourselves. God created himself like himself and called himself us. I am. And when we hold a different idea about who we are, it's a false idea. When we try to make of ourselves something that God didn't create, it's a false idea. But it's not real, and it can never become real. It can live 1,000 lifetimes, and you can live 1,000 or 2,000 lifetimes trying to change who you are, trying to prove that you're something different than God created. And it won't last. A false idea does not last. It says, so what is sin except a false idea about who you are? It says forgiveness merely looks at this false idea. This is what true forgiveness is, according to God, according to what Jesus demonstrated and what the Course is advocating. So it says forgiveness is merely looking at this false idea of who you are and realizing it's not who I am. It's a false idea. I am not the labels that the world put on me. I am not who I thought I was. I'm not a body. I'm free. See, I remain as God created me. And so when we merely look at this false idea and realize that it's a false idea about who we are, a false identification, it says, we therefore let it go. We let go of the idea of who we thought we were. And it's in the letting go of the idea. It's going to tell us in the next sentence. It says, what then is free to take the place of the false idea that we let go? You know what's free to take its place? Is now the will of God. And what is the will of God? Your happiness. What is the will of God? Your true identity. What is the will of God? That the son, that the creation, that the daughter come to know the true self that they share with God as one with God. That's what is there to take the place of a falsity, of a false idea of who we are. So it's always been about our identity. This whole dramatic timeline of humanity and humanity's search for the truth, and then this man called Jesus who came into the middle of this story and say, this is the truth, this is the light, this is who we are. Let's all join in, because the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, this is all we need to know, that we're all one. Let's have a party. And we know how that story ended. Humanity, what? It's too much light for me. Check him out. No, we're something else. We're sinners. They rejected their own identity. And now here we are in 2022. And God's message has not changed. Heaven has not changed. What God created you and me as the innocent, holy home of God, it has not changed. And we but today continue to herald this message of reality, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the oneness that we share, the changelessness of who we are. So that's what forgiveness is. It's looking at the falsity and identifying and recognizing the falsity of what we have tried to do, of what we've tried to make of ourselves, and letting that go. It's called awakening. It's called enlightenment. It's called to be born again. It's called to be saved. We call it a whole lot of things. But it's just basically waking up and learning this one lesson. The one lesson: forgive, and you will see things differently. You will see things as they really are. You will see yourself as you really are. You will see your brother as he really is. You will see yourself as the innocent, holy home of God, as you are, and all humanity is, regardless of what they're acting like or looking like. Don't matter. You realize that what is falsity. And it's temporary. It's coming to pass. It will wake up. God guarantees it. If you have to live 10,000 lifetimes, you will wake up to this truth. And you can do it, in the awareness of a body. You don't have to be bodiless to learn this lesson. Forgive, and you will see this differently. Forgive, and you will see this differently. These are the words the Holy Spirit speaks to all your tribulations, all your pain, all your suffering, regardless of its form. These are the words with which temptation ends and guilt is abandoned. And is revered no more. These are the words which end the dream of sin consciousness and rid the mind of fear. These are the words by which salvation comes to all the world. Forgive, and you will see this differently. Shall we not learn to say these words when we are tempted to believe that pain is real and death becomes our choice instead of life? Shall we not learn to say these words when we have understood their power to release all minds from bondage? These are words which give us power over all events that seem to have been given power over us. We see them rightly when we hold these words in full awareness, and do not forget these words apply to everything that we see or any brother or sister looks upon amiss. It says, how can we tell when we are seeing wrong or someone else is failing to perceive the lesson he should learn? Does pain seem real in the perception? If it does, be sure the lesson has not been learned. And there remain an unforgiving hiding in the mind that sees the pain through eyes the mind direct. God would not have you suffer in this way, but God would help you to forgive yourself. For his creation does not remember who he is when we see through the eyes of unforgiveness. We don't remember who we are. And God would have us not to forget his love and all the gift that his love brings with it. Would we not renounce our own salvation? Or would we renounce our own salvation by holding on to unforgiving thoughts? That's what we're doing. When we hold unforgiving thoughts about others, we're renouncing our own salvation because others are one with us. It says, would we fail to learn the simple lesson that heaven's teacher sets before us, that all pain may disappear and God may be what remembered by us. We can't remember God and be holding another brother or sister in unforgiveness. You can't see God. You can't even see your own self. This is how critical forgiveness is. This is how simple we have looked beyond. This is how we have complicated life when life is so simple. All things are lessons that God would have us learn. He would not leave one unforgiving thought without correction. So all of our mind is being renewed or corrected to think correctly. That's how we're transformed, by the renewing of our mind. And God would not leave one thought, one unforgiving thought, uncorrected in us. Not one. That's why the lessons keep coming around in your life, and around and around and around, until we learn the lesson to forgive. It's in every situation, every scenario in your life where there's pain and suffering and feeling of anxiety. It has to do with holding on to unforgiving thoughts. Didn't know that, did you? It says, not only would he not leave one unforgiving thought corrected, nor one thorn or one nail to hurt you in any way. He would ensure that his holy rest remained untroubled and serene, without a care, in an eternal home which cares for him. And he would have all tears be wiped away, with none remaining yet unshed, and none but waiting their appointed time to fail. For God has willed that laughter should replace each tear, and that his creation, which is you and me, be free again. So this is the lesson God would have us learn. There is a way to look on everything. Notice now, this is the conclusion of this workbook lesson today. There is a way of looking upon everything and let it be to us another step to God and to the salvation of the world, and to all that speak of terror. There's a way of looking. There is a lesson that God would have us learn, and a way of looking at everything. And it's this: I will forgive, and this will disappear. I will forgive, and this will disappear. Remember, we live in a world of perception, a world of coming and going. Things are always coming and going. They are not permanent. The only thing permanent about this world is you and me. All others, objects and objects of experience, relationships, all of it is temporal. And it all changes in the twinkling of an eye. What is that twinkling of an eye? The twinkling of the eye, when we look upon it through eyes of forgiveness, it changes instantly. And eventually it said it will disappear. It won't be the same, in other words, because it's not true. It's not real. The form will change. The circumstances will change. The situation will change. You guys know, like I know, if we would just have waited 24 hours before we reacted, we would have been more better off. But we reacted as though the thing was real and it needed something that needed to be done. But if we would have waited 24 hours, not even 24 hours, sometime if we just wait an hour or half a day, the thing gonna be changed. If something appears to you in the morning, by the afternoon it's changed. But if we only have knee-jerk reactions immediately based on the ego, because the ego says you got to do something, you got to change this is going to hurt you, this is an attack, this is a threat, and there we go. Holding that unforgiving thought. But if only we would learn the lessons that God would have us learn and look at things from God's perspective. Our response to everything is, I will forgive, and this will disappear. So, to every apprehension in your life, in my life, to every care, in every form of suffering, to all of it, repeat these self-same words. I will forgive, and this will disappear. Try it. You might like it. And then you hold the key. When we say these words, when we take this perspective, when we take this point of view, when we recognize, like it said over here, when we but recognize when there's a recognition. And I can't find the sentence right now. But anyway, it says, to every apprehension, every care, and every form of suffering, repeat these self-same words. And then you hold the key that opens heaven's gate and brings the love of God, the Father, down to earth at last, to raise it up to heaven. To raise what up to heaven? The apprehension, the care, the suffering. God will take this final step himself with no effort on your part because you've done your part. What is your part? What is our part? What is our function? Our function is forgiveness. We've said this time and time again. Our function in life is forgiveness. We forgive, first of all, ourselves for dreaming the dream of separation. And then we forgive the dream of separation. And we forgive all the figures in the dream, all humanity. Because we realize, well, it's falsity. So we've done our part. And when we've done our part, it says, heaven gates is open to bring the love of God and our Father in on this situation. We have brought truth in on this situation. We have brought reality now to deal with unreality. We have brought truth now to deal with what the falsity. And so without effort now, it says what? It says, this now becomes a heaven. This now becomes in heaven's hand. It says, God will take this final step himself. And so do not deny the little step that he asks for us to take to him. What is the little step? Forgiveness. There it is again. We can't get away from it. Why? Because it is the means by which what? Heavens is open. It is the means by which we open ourselves back up to our true identity. It is the means by which we resolve all conflict. It is the means by which we save the world. No guns, no bullets, no tanks, no missiles, no competition. All of the ways that we're trying to find peace, and peace is not in any of that. Peace is in your forgiveness of yourself. Of your personal self. Of the falsity of your identity. Is it the forgiveness of that? In all humanity. And we need to forgive God for thinking that God is responsible for any of this. And he's not. Or she or it. Which means you're not responsible. When you fall asleep and you're dreaming and you're having a nightmare, you're not responsible for that. You're not responsible for what goes on in that nightmare or that dream. Why? Because it's not real. It's not real. It's a fantasy. It's a vain imagining. It's a hallucination. It's not real. So there's no responsibility on your part. Just like in this world, God said, there's no responsibility on my part. None of this is real. What y'all freaking out about? Why are y'all doing this to each other? Don't you know who you are? That's your brother. That's your sister. All these games y'all are playing down here. What are y'all doing? So, to conclude, workbook lesson 213. All right, we are moving on down the track. To conclude, workbook lesson 213. I hope this is helping you. I hope this is clearing up any confusion, any doubt, any fear, any worry, any anxiety, any suffering, any dis-ease in your life, any discouragement in your life, any hopelessness in your life. I hope this is helping. I know it's helping if you're listening. And I know there's a lot listening that would not say, well, I'm listening. But that's okay. That's not my job. My job is to forgive. And God's job is what? To give the increased. My job is to forgive. I have an easy job. Forgiveness. You have an easy job in life. Forgiveness. You have the key to the kingdom. Forgiveness. It opens heaven's gate. And it lets truth. And it lets the law of God, what? It operates freely in your life. And life becomes what? Really kind of simple and really kind of easy. Oh, that's all it takes? Try it. I believe you will like it. I do. But you have to what? You have to be convinced. You have to be diligent about these things. You have to be diligent about your godliness. You have to be diligent about God's kingdom, about God's reality. You have to be diligent about reality. You have to be a lover of the truth. You have to ask, and you have to seek, and you have to knock. And it said, be open. Forgiveness. It is the means. It is the one means that we have to fulfill our function. And it doesn't take anything but your little willingness. Just thank God you don't have to go to the bank to get it. You don't have to go to the bank and ask him for a loan for forgiveness. You don't have to ask your mother or your brother or your husband or your wife or your children for forgiveness. You don't have to you don't have to ask anyone for it. Never ask anyone for forgiveness. No. You just practice it. No one can stop you from practicing forgiveness in any situation or circumstance. Look at Jesus. Look at Jesus, and he is the example of the man that mastered life. And what did he do in his most in his most challenging time? What did he do? What did he say? See, he's trying to teach us something. What did he say? Let me remind you what he said. He said, Father, I forgive them. Father, I forgive them. That's what he said. In his most challenging, he was in a lurch. He was on a cross. He was totally imprisoned. His body was, but his mind was not. And he remembered who he was and who they were and who God is. And he said, Father, I forgive them. And he was saying, Father, I forgive myself. But they know not what they are doing. So if Jesus, in his incarnation, he resorted to the one thing on earth that kept heaven's gate open to him for total and complete resolution, he resolved to the forgiveness that was his function. And how do we think we can make up some other way or some other plan that will work? No other way or no other plan will work. Look at every problem in your life right now. This is your life. Look at every perceived problem, because there's no problems. When you're looking out of this perspective, there's really no problem. But look at what you perceive to be a problem or a hindrance in your life. What Workbook Lesson 213 is telling us, and what the course has been telling us from day one, is that what you're perceiving is not real. It is a part of this perceptual world. It comes and it goes. It changes. It fluctuates. But who you are and what you are a part of does not change and fluctuate. And so, in order for you to keep your sanity about what appears to be changing and fluctuating around you in this world, it says, remind yourself in every situation to say these words. Forgive. And not only will you see it differently, but it will eventually disappear, or it will eventually change its form or its effect on you. It is powerful. Because just think of the other alternative. Is to go on the attack. And we know the results of that. Go into judgment. go into attachment. Attach yourself to it as though it is real. What you think your brother has done, what you think humanity has done to you. A lot of us are holding on to unforgiving thoughts because of the history of the race that we appear to be born into. A lot of us are in pain and suffering. We don't know why. Because we're holding on to an allegiance to that which is not real. We're this allegiance to a false idea. We're holding on to allegiances to false ideas. And it's causing pain and suffering and mental anguish and anxiety. And we don't understand where it's coming from or how to get rid of it. Well, this lesson has taught us where it's coming from. It's coming from us holding unforgiving thoughts. It's coming from our belief in a false personal self. It's coming from the creation of idols that we worship, that further separate and divide us, like government and religion and arts and all of these things and that we have made. And it's given us the simple answer right here, the simple solution. The simple solution is what? It's not reality. So it's easy to forgive when you understand that it's not reality. This whole world is not reality. So you forgive the whole world. In every act, in every activity, in every event, in the whole world. You can do that right now. And it changes everything. It removes all the blocks to the awareness of love's presence, of heaven's presence. And now heaven can take the final step for the disappearance of its falsity. You can't make that happen. But what you can do is to forgive. That's what you can do. And I got to stop there. But I wanted to make this point very clear to myself and to those that are listening, because this is the simplicity. And it unravels the complexity that we have been so engaged in and so frustrated about in our thinking. And so it is. I am not a body. I am free. I'm aware of the body that I am using. Notice now, I'm aware of the body that I'm using in this perceptual world to bring the message of light and love to the world. And I'm aware of this healthy, serviceable device we call the body that is being used in service of God to teach the lessons that God would have us learn. And the central theme in that lesson is forgiveness. I'm aware of that body. And it serves us well when we use it for God's purposes and don't give it purposes that it cannot fulfill, like my identification. We are not a body. We are free. We're not imprisoned by the limitations of this world, by the limitation of form and time. We're not limited by that. but we are free and free indeed to be the full expression of the innocent creation of God. It's who we are, full of joy and happiness and peace. That's who we are. That is the will of God. Your happiness is God's will above all else. God has our interest, best interest at heart more than we do ourselves. And so we're learning to place our full confidence in the one will. Not our will, Dad, but let your will, Dad, be done. Because it is within your will that I am fulfilled, that I am content, that I am confident, that I have certainty, that I have assurance. It is in your will that all things are possible. Wow. Isn't that beautiful? We remain as our Father created us. We are the holy home of God. We are the innocent creation of a loving Father. Thank you so much. I gotta go. But I'll be back on tomorrow. Don't miss it. Workbook Lesson 214. We're moving towards the end of this review period. And guess what happens at the end of each review period? We embark on 20 new discoveries, 20 new ideas from God. But we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We want to know what's in lesson 214 now. So as you go through today, just think about everything that you encounter as a lesson that God would have you learn. And we know what that lesson is: forgiveness. Have a great day. Bye-bye.